Hey y'all, I really want you to get started drafting your TOK essay today. This assignment will also have a link to the video that you're watching right now if you want to make reference to it. It's got some resources here which I'll talk through, and then I'll show you a couple other tips that I find useful or have found useful in thinking through my ideas. So first of all, this is the TOK essay presentation that we've already looked at. We're one step behind here, but I really need you guys to try to get this draft done as soon as you can. The sooner that you submit it, the sooner I can give you written feedback, but by Sunday at the latest if you want feedback from me. The prescribed titles are here, but you already know which one you're doing. Some basics. Remember that it's a 1,600 word maximum essay, and the focus of the essay should be on knowledge questions. That means raising knowledge questions, emphasize real life situations, which is experiences, personal narrative, also real life examples from history, from the history of sciences, or from examples of artworks or things like that, depending on your areas of knowledge. This is the assessment instrument. It goes from 10 down to 1, and that is also attached separately, so you can take a look at this. I linked these scored samples. I just pulled a few of them, but there are 4 here, 2 10s, that's perfect scores, 1 9 and 1 8. So you can feel free to look at those essays, and also the examiner's comments, which are, some of them are less useful, but to give you an idea of what examiners are looking for. The other thing that's on here is this framework that I have constructed, which should give you an idea of how to organize your essay. So the first thing you need to do is introduce, and that should be a matter of unpacking the title, right? Rephrasing, defining key concepts, thinking about what assumptions the title makes. A lot of these essays, when you look at these good examples, they start with something like, in order to answer this question, we must first decide, and then start deciding on how you're going to define terms, and then use those definitions as you move through, or offer a couple of different definitions. By this, we might mean this, in which case this. By this, we might also mean this, in which case this other thing would be happening, and then you can tangle with those things as you move into your essay. Put in sort of signpost this and give us that so what? What's the title getting at? And post yourself up a tentative position. Write a thesis statement that seems true, and then see how that thesis statement unfolds as you go through your essay. And then the big 2 sections here are one section dedicated to one area of knowledge, the other section dedicated to a second area of knowledge. And within those, I would consider, how is it relevant? Write a claim that answers it in relation to your AOK. Write a claim and then develop that claim using examples. This is good writing in general, and especially important here. Make some decisions, some tentative claims that you can make about how this area of knowledge works with regards to the question, and then develop that through your examples. These are some questions to guide your thinking, but I wanted you to draw your attention to this word practitioners. So when you're talking about history, yes, you're probably going to be drawing on the specifics of certain historical events, but you really ought to be thinking about how those historical events are dealt with by practitioners. So how do historians write about that event? What sorts of evidence do they have to use in order to justify their position on that event? How do we as learners in the classroom deal with learning history? How does that affect us? So these are practitioners, rather than focusing in too concretely on the specifics of the content. You should be thinking about that content like a practitioner would thinking about it, either a scientist or someone learning science, or somewhere in between. Remember that your real life situations can come from your own experiences in classes if they're relevant. How do the problems affect? How do they go about solving and addressing the problems? This is going to be key to making claims. Is that scientists, for example, have to solve the problems inherent in their field? How do they do it? What answers do they come up with? How do they deal with these things? Even if it's not clear cut, understand that scientists have solved these problems in one way or another. What examples can you provide? And this is essential. Talk through your examples when you're talking about them solving or addressing the problem. Use an example of a scientific problem that scientists have proposed, if science is your area of knowledge. And then go on in another paragraph to write a second claim that answers the question in a different way. This might be a way that seems to be a really sort of clear counterclaim. In some ways, science is this, and then for your second paragraph, on the other hand, science this. In some ways, historians do this, but it also seems like some historians do this. That's a nice thing. Or just offer a different perspective, right? Pick one of those terms that you've defined sort of ambiguously and think about, well, if we consider it this other way. This is really important to this idea of other perspectives, right? Which is an important part of the instrument. Then, so there's some more examples. Then mix and repeat for your second area of knowledge, except for spend a little time thinking about how that area of knowledge is different than, right? When you set up this next claim, maybe think about how it's similar to or different than the area of knowledge you just talked about. It would be nice if your second paragraph, your second part started with, in the arts, on the other hand, and then shift gears. But once again, think through practitioners. Don't get bogged down in the content. Think about how, if you're doing art, think about how artists have to deal with it, but think about how we as appreciators of art have to deal with it, right? As audiences or as critics or as people who judge art. That those kinds of things are really important. Thinking about those connections to those concepts. And then to conclude, bring it back to that thesis statement, see if it still stands, or do you need to modify your thesis at the end, by the end? And then leave us with something forward-looking, right? Which means how do these questions remain ambiguous? How will they continue to be relevant? Why is this important? Why does it matter? So what? To conclude, there's 4 links down here to some other frameworks. 2 of them are really similar to this one, but they provide some really good explanation and advice. And the other 2 are slightly different. So take a look at those and see if they make sense. I just found these on the internet, but these are good, good guidance and good information. So this also gives you a recommendation for word count, what you should be aiming for. And that's, of course, doesn't break down exactly that way, but if you write 600 words each for each of those, then that's 1,200. Then you have 1,350, and if you do 250 down here, then you're right there at the 1,600 mark. So use those words wisely and dig in. Also wanted to show you something I was playing with the other day. I'm going to use one from a TOK prescribed title from last year. So here's one that we can look at. Does it matter if our acquisition of knowledge happens in bubbles where some information and voices are excluded? Discuss with reference to 2 areas of knowledge. So this idea of bubbles is really neat. So Pi is another AI. Pi.ai is how you get there. And Pi is really nice for a couple of reasons. First of all, I really like the voice that it takes. Of course, you can train it to use whatever voice you like. But I really like the one that it takes, and it's pretty clear. The other nice thing about Pi is it's connected to the internet, so it can read links, and it can also feed you links if you're looking for resources. But I was using Pi the other day just as a sort of sounding board. Pi is not profound, and it's not going to give you anything that you couldn't probably figure out on your own or find from some cursory Google searches. But it is really nice because you can kind of ask it some things, let it give you some information, and then from that information, maybe it prompts something else. I was thinking about it as a sort of Platonic dialogue, right, where I'm the Aristotle proposing something new, and then Pi sort of reframes that for me so that I can kind of look at it again, and then I can take that and ask a new question. And that digging process the other day I was really having a lot of fun with it, and was thinking about its use here. So that title again has to do with bubbles, information bubbles. So I'm just going to start by asking, what do you know about information bubbles? Just see what kinds of things come up here from Pi. Well, those echo chambers or filter bubbles, situations, the results of self-reinforcing cycle where individuals are less likely to. Have you noticed information bubbles in your online experiences? For sure. I feel like social media is that way. Social media platforms. Okay, that's cool. But so we got this social media, but social media is not really an area of knowledge yet. So that kind of is the first idea. How do you see? How do you think information bubbles affect things like scientific knowledge. We'll do that. Information can have a significant impact on the public understanding and acceptance of scientific knowledge. Okay, so this is still giving us that, so that's neat. When we're thinking about climate change denial or something like that, this is sort of where we're hearing this polarization. What about for scientists themselves? Are there examples of when scientists are limited because of the bubbles that they exist in? Let's see if we can get even this called information bubbles. Paradigm lock-in, nice. Now we're getting somewhere. Scientists, a particular theory or framework, becomes so dominant, right? So we don't want to think that anything besides the giant asteroid killed the dinosaurs, so that when other things come in, then that's sort of bubble. Cultural or gender bias, cool, yeah. Even in the sciences, this is neat. This is getting us into a place, right? What about with regards to interdisciplinary barriers? A lot of scientific papers are behind paywalls. Yeah. Can that be a kind of bubble? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I did bring up so here's some more information point. Only those with the means to pay for access can fully participate in the science. Advisors access. Your point about access makes me think of funding too. Yeah, funding is another critical aspect of shapes information bubbles in science, which is well funded. Unique feature in Whale's voice boxes could play on swing. The breaking through sheds light on a mystery that has puzzled scientists for years. It's worth noting that the focus on this particular question may be resulting in funding and research priorities to create an infrastructure with field. This is going to be fascinating. It's essential to consider there may be other important questions. Oh, neat. Oh, so this is something that is cool but doesn't really matter, but only was studied because of the funding. Nice. Very cool. That's way cool. So this is an idea that you can use, and it will help you generate some ideas and some examples, and then give you some terms. Terms like interdisciplinary barriers that might help you in developing your point. Of course, if you decide that you want to quote something that Pi says, you need to quote it and then cite it, and you can figure out how to do that. But really, I'm thinking about this more as a way of getting your thinking, pointing you in some interesting directions, and getting your thinking going as you start generating your essay. And please work hard, and I'll see you soon.